Has anyone here ever heard this story of the temptation of Christ before? Is there anyone here who has never heard this story? Conlon, this is a great story. It's one that you should know. And you will, because we hear it every year. Every year, the first Sunday of Lent. Now, it's a story like some stories in our Gospels and in our texts, in our Scriptures, that is easier to understand from one perspective of the cross than the other. And I think this particular story is easier to understand before the cross. Like, we know and we say that Jesus is fully God and fully man. Yeah, you, right? So, if I say to you, is Jesus man or God, you would say both. Yes. But the first century reader would not have this understanding necessarily. And at the time of these events, what's being played out is, what kind of Messiah is this going to be? Right? But the church kind of came up with this idea of fully God, fully man, the Trinity, a Father, Son, Spirit, one God, three ways of being God, as a way of understanding the cross and the resurrection. So when I get to a story like this week, I was like, why would God have to be tested in order to be God? You know what I mean? So for me this week, what was more interesting to me, and I hope will be interesting to you, is the idea focusing not on Jesus' divinity, but on his humanity. I'm not saying he wasn't divine, he was. I'm not saying he wasn't God, he was. But I'm saying what was interesting to me, what I want to talk about today, and I hope you will connect with, is his humanity. The idea that he was tested. Okay. How many of us, when we were children, imagined what we would be when we grew up? Anybody? And didn't we have these fantastic visions? Yes? How many astronauts were we going to have? How many firemen or firewomen? Yes? How many policemen or policewomen? How many teachers? How many presidents? How many billionaires? Yes. Conlon, I'm going to be a billionaire. God bless you, brother. Say your dreams high, man. Most of us thought about something that we would be, and most of us thought of it in terms of a profession, not necessarily what kind of person am I going to be. I think we just assumed we would be good and honorable people, right? But we thought of a profession. So, how did it go? Here we are, adults, most of us. And how does the reality of either the job that you lived in or worked in, or the person you have become, how did that reality stack up against what you thought when you were a child? Did you, in other words, grow up to be who you thought or who you said that you would be? Not even close! Well, what made you into who you are, I think? I think this. There's a truth here. That we become, let me say it this way, who we become is a reflection of the sum of our choices that we've made along the way. Do you agree with that? And I'm not saying everybody starts with a level playing field, some people have more, some advantages than others, all that. But I do think that we make choices along the way, don't we? Career choices, education choices, relationship choices, ethical choices, financial choices, moral choices. And I think that even though there are some things that are out of our control, no question, largely we are the products of what we have chosen to do with what we have been given. And when you grow up, you see that there's a difference between your youthful imagination and the actual reality, right? Of what you say and what you actually do. Oftentimes, there's a bit of a disconnect there. And that, I think, is the message of this story of the temptation of Jesus. Here's what I mean. Scripture says that this is the time that he begins. When he claims, he takes on his life's work, he begins to do the thing that he was born to do. And of course, this then is the time that he gets tested. Now, to the first century reader, the question of this story of the temptation is, what kind of Messiah will Jesus become? Luke has talked about his genealogy. Did he come from the right family? Did he make the right decisions? That's what's going on here. What kind of a Messiah will he be? That's the first century question. And I think for the human side of Jesus at least, right? For Jesus, the man, the question might have been, what kind of man am I? What kind of person will I become? How does this match up? And to us, I think, what we ask now on this side of the cross is, what kind of story is this? What does this mean? So since I already know what kind of Messiah Jesus is or was, that's not my question. This week, I imagined the story of the temptation not as a scene in a movie with the devil and Jesus being magically transported top of the mountain, down to Jerusalem, up over here. Is that how you see it, right? That's how I see it, typically in my mind, right? Here they are, and then poof, here they are, and poof, here they are. Okay. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm saying, to me, this week, what was interesting was rather to think about this as in terms of the tortured thoughts or nagging doubts of a man who knew who he was, who he was supposed to be, but perhaps doubted his own ability to go through with it. To turn his declared faith and divine calling into an actual lived ministry. In other words, Jesus asking himself, am I up for it? Am I up to it? See, I imagine Jesus as a young boy, if he knew he was going to be God and Messiah, right? I imagine him saying, there is nothing that I wouldn't do for God. There is nothing that I wouldn't do for God's people. I'll do anything. My life is yours. But the boy doesn't know what the man knows. That when we are forced to live out our intentions and our promises, it just isn't that simple, is it? We're all humans. Is it simple? I don't think it couldn't have been simple for Jesus either. We make choices along the way. Perhaps we even make compromises. This story, taken as a historical event, tells anyone who has ears to hear or eyes to see that God is up to something new, that the old ways are at risk and the kingdom has a new king and the people have a new Messiah, who, unlike others before or since, desires nothing, needs nothing, will stand for nothing less than the freedom of God's people from their burdens, from their yokes, and from their devotion to the ways that lead to death. But imagined as an internal conversation Jesus is having, his struggle with the temptation reflects and foreshadows our own wrestling with indecision and doubt, and stands as a clarion call to us to trust God enough to choose an adult faith, even when it is uncomfortable or costly. To choose an adult faith, to let go of our childish faith, and choose an adult faith, even when it is uncomfortable or costly. Either way, for Jesus and for those of any age who will follow him, what the temptation story teaches us is that life depends on service and not self. That faith is about demonstration, not demagoguery. And that we all have choices to make that affect who we will become. So, what kind of people have we become? In what ways have we been tested? In what ways are we being tested even now, today? Who is testing you? And what voices are you listening to? Jesus had the voice of Satan, right, speaking to him. What voices are you hearing? Who is whispering to you that you can't do it? That you won't do it? That you will fail? Because guess what? You have always failed. What voice are you hearing? That because something, fill in the blank, happened to you, or because once you did or said or thought something, that you will never change, and you will never measure up, and you will never be good enough. Who among us doesn't hear those voices? I do. And who among us doesn't also hear the voices of doubt that tell us, God isn't real. God doesn't care. God can't. God didn't. God won't. I hear them. And when are we most vulnerable to respond to those voices? It's when we're in the wilderness. That's where Jesus was. Have you ever been in the wilderness? I have. Maybe you're there right now. If you're not, maybe you're headed there and you don't know. It turns out that the voice that Jesus hears in his wilderness story is telling him that there are only two choices: either blasphemy or idolatry. That's what the voice is telling him. It's saying, either you're God, you're powerful, use that power. This is self, Jesus says, and this is blasphemy. Or the voice says, I'm God, small g, I'm God. This all is mine. You can have it. You deserve it. I am powerful. Worship me. This is the world speaking. And this is idolatry. And aren't those our temptations too? When we're in our wilderness, the voice we hear that's tempting us says one of two things. It either says, I'm all that matters. Get out of my way. You are a blank. Fill in the blank. Something I don't like, whatever that is. You're a blank. And if we fill in that blank with anything but beloved child of God, we have lost our way. Or else, the voice might be saying, all that matters is you. All that matters is me. All that matters to us is blank, but nothing else. And if we fill that blank with anything but God, we have also lost our way. What I want you to know is those are false choices. Those are lies that others tell us or that we tell ourselves. I'm all that matters, get out of my way, or all that matters is something else. But there's another choice. There's another voice. If you're in the wilderness, there's another voice. You have to listen for it. And you have to put aside or set aside or ignore the voices that are calling you to either blasphemy or idolatry. Basically, self over others. Anything over God. Those are the two things I'm saying. There's another voice, and that voice is none other than Jesus Christ himself, the true Messiah. And it is that true call that if you listen, you will recognize, because you heard it at your baptism. It was calling to you. And that is the voice that you have been listening so intently for and holding so tightly to, as you too shed your childish faith and piece together a true faith, an adult faith that you could claim. A faith which understands that there are always temptations. There are always choices. And even when we choose poorly, that voice never stops calling our name. Come to me, my beloved. Find me, my beloved. Come back, my beloved. Not you are worthless, you are lost. Good luck. But I know where you are. Come back. It is that voice which only our spirit can hear and only our heart can follow. Listen to that voice. It does not lead you to blasphemy or idolatry. It leads you to God.